In Southside Chicago, a home-recorded rap video shot under house arrest turned a teenager named Chief Keef into an icon, while headlines exploded linking drill music to shootings, gang indictments, and FBI surveillance. The official story says drill was just the brutal sound of its environment. 808s, relentless bass, raw stories from O-Block's forgotten streets. But for years, evidence of secret government monitoring, courtroom battles over rap lyrics, and the shadow of COINTELPRO have fueled one burning question. If the system wanted to save these neighborhoods, why did every force seem to let the violence and the music spiral out of control? Did the CIA make drill music, or is the truth even darker? The answer starts with the sound itself. Drill music is built on a foundation that hits with the force of a sledgehammer. The core of its sound is the 808 drum kit, specifically the deep sliding sub-bass that rattles the whole block. Every beat is stripped down to its essentials: a chest-thumping kick, crisp snare, and hi-hats that dance in rapid-fire triplets. Producers like Young Chop and DJL have mastered the formula, using minimal melodies. Sometimes just a single haunting synth or a few piano notes, looped over and over. There's no lush harmony, no bright chords. Instead, the beats are cold, repetitive, and almost hypnotic. What sets drill apart from other rap genres is the way it uses space. The drums punch through, but there's room in the mix for every word to land with maximum weight. The hi-hats stutter and skip, sometimes rolling in bursts of 16th notes, creating a sense of tension that never lets up. The bass doesn't just sit underneath, it slides and bends, sometimes rising unexpectedly, sometimes dropping out and leaving a sudden void. That unpredictability mirrors the reality outside the studio walls. Even the melodies are more like warning signals than traditional hooks. A few notes, stretched and warped, run through effects until they sound almost inhuman. It's music that feels like a siren in the night, or the hum of danger just out of sight. Producers will often run the same motif for the whole track, letting the rhythm do the heavy lifting. The result is a sound that's both sparse and overwhelming, every element calculated to keep listeners on edge. This sonic blueprint became the backdrop for a generation of artists who used it to tell stories that were as raw and unfiltered as the beats themselves. The sound of drill isn't just aggressive, it's a warning, a pulse, the soundtrack to survival in a city where every day feels like a test. Chief Keef was only 16 when he became the face of drill. He recorded tracks in his grandmother's living room, sometimes with an ankle monitor still strapped to his leg. His breakout hit, I Don't Like, didn't just go viral, it turned him into a legend overnight. Keef's presence was raw, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. His lyrics weren't just stories, they were warnings. He delivered each line with a kind of melodic grit that made every word stick. Even his most casual verses sounded like dispatches from a war zone. Lil Durk brought a different energy. Where Keef was blunt, Durk was melodic, weaving heartbreak and aggression into the same verse. He engineered much of his own early music, layering auto-tuned hooks over pounding beats. Durk's voice cracked with emotion, whether he was rapping about survival or betrayal. His music felt like a diary, but one written under constant threat. The DIY spirit was everywhere. Durk and his crew recorded in bedrooms, passed around borrowed microphones, and uploaded tracks before sunrise. King Von was a storyteller. His verses played out like crime novels, each detail sharper than the last. Von's ability to turn real-life events into narrative lyrics blurred the line between fact and myth. When he rapped about O-Block, it wasn't just a set. It was a world, mapped out in names, streets, and grudges. Fans and rivals alike listened for clues, sometimes hearing confessions hidden in plain sight. Lil Jeff, another Southside original, never reached the same level of fame, but his music captured the sense of urgency that defined drill's early days. His tracks were short, direct, and heavy with coded language. Jeff's verses echoed with the paranoia and pride of a young man who knew every day could be his last. Each of these artists carried the sound of their block into the world. They weren't just rapping about violence, they were documenting the reality around them, one verse at a time. Their crews became their families, their home studios became safe havens, and their music became the only way to make sense of the chaos outside. In drill, every name meant something, every track was a message, and every beat was a reminder that survival itself was an act of defiance. Southside Chicago is where drill took root, not in boardrooms or polished studios, but in cramped apartments and crowded backyards. Bedrooms doubled as makeshift studios. A mattress propped against the wall could be the only soundproofing. Cheap USB mics dangled from closet rods, wires snaking between laptops and battered speakers. The hum of a window unit mixed with the hiss of hi-hats, and every take was a race against the noise outside or a knock at the door. Kids who barely had enough for bus fare pooled cash for studio time, but most didn't bother. They bounced tracks off cracked phones, trading verses over Facebook and texting beats back and forth before anyone had even heard the word viral. Block parties became the first stage. Someone would drag out a pair of speakers, hook up a laptop, and let the beat ride. The crowd pressed in. Cousins, neighbors, sometimes the same people mentioned in the lyrics. Every performance was a test. If a track hit, word spread through the neighborhood before sunrise. If it flopped, it got buried under the next wave of uploads. These parties weren't just about music, they were about survival. The same blocks that saw shootings after midnight saw teenagers rapping about what they'd witnessed that afternoon. Home studios offered a kind of shelter. Inside, the world shrank to a handful of friends, a glowing laptop screen, and the hope that one song might change everything. Some nights, the only light came from the computer. Outside, sirens echoed. Inside, the beat never stopped. The city's abandonment was everywhere. Boarded up schools, empty lots, jobs that never came back. But inside these rooms, music was the only thing that felt permanent. Drill wasn't born out of nowhere. It was built, track by track, in bedrooms and on blocks that the city had tried to forget. Factories once lined the south side, their smokestacks rising above rows of brick houses. Over the decades, those jobs vanished. The steel mills that anchored neighborhoods like South Chicago and Pullman began shutting down in the late 1970s. By the early 2000s, entire industrial corridors stood silent. Windows smashed, machinery stripped, roofs caved in. For the families left behind, work became a rumor. In some zip codes, unemployment hovered near 20%, while the city's investment poured into downtown high-rises and tourist districts miles away. Block after block, houses fell into disrepair. Redlining, banks refusing to loan to black families, kept home values low and made it nearly impossible for residents to fix what was broken. Maps from the 1980s and 1990s show whole swaths of the South and West Sides colored red, marked as too risky for investment. The result? Empty lots, abandoned storefronts, and a housing stock that crumbled year by year. Even basic services, grocery stores, clinics, bus lines, thinned out or disappeared entirely. In Englewood, more than half the storefronts on some stretches of 63rd Street were boarded up by 2010. For young people, the city's neglect was impossible to ignore. After school, there were few safe places to go and even fewer ways to earn money. Some tried hustling mixtapes or working odd jobs, but most options paid pennies or nothing at all. The closest grocery store might be miles away. The nearest job, even farther. Every closed business meant another dark window, another reminder that opportunity had moved on. This wasn't just poverty, it was the slow erasure of a community's future. The city's own data mapped the decline. Between 1960 and 2010, Chicago lost nearly 300,000 manufacturing jobs. In the neighborhoods where drill would later take hold, the loss was felt with every shuttered factory, every empty classroom, every friend who left and never came back. For the kids who stayed, music became one of the only ways to push back against a world that seemed determined to forget them. In 2013, the Chicago Board of Education voted to close 49 public schools in a single stroke, the largest wave of school closures ever seen in the United States. Most of these buildings stood in Black and Latino neighborhoods already hollowed out by years of job loss and city neglect. For thousands of kids, the change was immediate and brutal. Suddenly, the walk to class meant crossing blocks controlled by rival sets, past corners where friends and enemies watched every move. The old school boundaries had acted like invisible borders, keeping neighborhood tensions in check. When those lines disappeared, so did whatever fragile peace had existed between blocks. Students who once felt safe traveling in groups now found themselves isolated, forced to navigate new routes that cut through hostile territory. Some parents tried to organize carpools or walking buses, but the city's resources stretched thin. Reports from the Board of Education documented a spike in fights and confrontations, incidents that rarely made the evening news but shaped the daily reality for anyone trying to get an education on the south or west sides. For the kids caught in the middle, the closures didn't just mean a longer walk. They meant new beefs, new boundaries, and a constant sense of threat. Even inside the new schools, tension simmered. Classrooms filled with students from different sets, each group sizing up the other. Old grudges carried over from blocks now forced together under one roof. Teachers struggled to keep order as fights broke out in hallways and cafeterias. Some students stopped coming altogether, their attendance records swallowed up by the bureaucracy. Law enforcement responded with increased patrols and a heavier police presence near the newly consolidated schools. The city called it a safety measure, but for many students, it just felt like another layer of surveillance. One more reminder that their neighborhoods were seen as problems to be managed, not communities to be cared for. The school closures didn't just redraw the map. They reshuffled the rules of survival, pushing young people deeper into a world where every block, every corner, and every after-school decision carried new risks. In the absence of safe spaces, the stories that would become the backbone of drill music found new urgency and new territory to claim. Patrol cars became a fixture on the south and west sides, their lights flashing day and night. In the late 1980s, the war on drugs brought a wave of new laws and police funding to Chicago. By the 1990s, the city's jail population had more than doubled. Black neighborhoods bore the brunt. In 1995, Cook County Jail held over 9,000 inmates, a record at the time, with the majority coming from just a handful of zip codes. Parole officers cycled through apartment buildings, clipboards in hand, checking up on fathers, brothers, and sons who'd just come home. Some would barely unpack before being picked up again on technical violations, missed curfews, failed drug tests, or just being seen with the wrong crowd. For families, it was a revolving door. One member out, another headed in. Kids learned to memorize inmate numbers and jailhouse phone schedules before they hit high school. Police presence wasn't just felt, it was inescapable. After a spike in homicides in the early 2000s, the Chicago Police Department expanded its gang units and launched saturation patrols across the South Side. Squad cars parked on corners, officers walked beats outside schools, and helicopters circled overhead after dark. In 2013 alone, the city spent nearly $1.5 billion on policing, dwarfing the budgets for schools, parks, or youth programs. For many young people, the walk to the store meant passing 2 or 3 squad cars, sometimes getting stopped and searched without warning. The message was clear. The city saw them as suspects first, students or artists second. This constant surveillance shaped every aspect of daily life. Drill artists rapped about it because they lived it. Parole checks at midnight, friends snatched up on warrants, parties broken up before the first verse could finish. The threat of jail hung over every decision. Even a minor arrest could mean months in county lockup, missing school, losing a job, or falling behind on rent. Parents tried to shield their kids, but the system was everywhere. In some neighborhoods, nearly half of all black men between 18 and 30 had been arrested at least once. The pressure was relentless. For drill's first generation, music became both an escape and a record of survival, a way to make sense of a world where freedom was always on the line. In 1956, the FBI launched a secret program called COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, aimed at surveilling and sabotaging black freedom movements, radical organizations, and the artists who gave them a voice. For 15 years, agents infiltrated meetings, planted informants, and wrote fake letters to pit leaders against each other. The Black Panther Party, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., none were off limits. FBI records, later pried loose by congressional investigators, show how far the agency went. They tracked musicians like Nina Simone and Gil Scott-Heron, convinced that revolutionary music could spark unrest. Sometimes, the FBI worked with local police to raid concerts or community events, hoping to fracture alliances and shut down organizing before it started. Other times, they fed stories to friendly journalists, painting black activists as dangerous, unstable, or criminal. When the Church Committee finally exposed COINTELPRO in the mid-1970s, the public learned just how deep the surveillance ran. The committee's reports documented thousands of pages of memos, wiretaps, and dirty tricks, everything from spreading rumors to forging evidence. The goal wasn't just to gather intelligence. It was to destabilize, disrupt, and discredit entire movements, especially when music or culture became a rallying point. FBI documents from the era mention youth radio, festivals, and even record contracts. The agency saw culture as a battlefield, and music as a weapon that could be turned against the state, or, with enough manipulation, against the community itself. Even after COINTELPRO was officially shut down in 1971, the tactics didn't disappear. Declassified files and FOIA releases show that federal agencies kept close watch on hip-hop as it rose from block parties to national stages. By the 1980s and 1990s, new forms of surveillance targeted rap concerts, community radio, and any artist seen as a threat to the status quo. The blueprint was already written: infiltrate, monitor, and, when possible, shape the message. The legacy of COINTELPRO set the stage for a new era, where the line between culture and control was never clear, and where every new sound coming out of the city carried echoes of past surveillance. In 1996, Gary Webb's Dark Alliance series landed with a force that rippled through American cities. Webb traced cocaine shipments into Los Angeles, linking Nicaraguan traffickers to the crack epidemic that devastated black neighborhoods. His reporting suggested these traffickers operated with the CIA's knowledge, as the agency sought funds for secret wars in Central America. The evidence, money transfers, anonymous sources, sealed court records, was tangled, but the core idea resonated. For communities already battered by drugs and policing, Webb's work echoed what many had long suspected, that government priorities came at the expense of their safety. The Iran-Contra hearings in 1987 had already exposed a hidden world of arms deals and covert funding. The question lingered: did some of that money flow from crack sales on American streets? Webb didn't claim to have proof, but his series planted doubt. In neighborhoods hollowed out by addiction and violence, the devastation was plain. Police raids became routine, families fractured, and faith in official explanations faded. Stories of government complicity became part of the local memory, repeated in barbershops and kitchens, growing with each retelling. Around the same time, a different kind of story took hold, a rumor about a secret meeting in 1991. The tale described music executives, private prison investors, and unnamed power brokers plotting to push gangster rap, aiming to fill prisons for profit. The story surfaced in anonymous letters and obscure blogs, never in mainstream news. No names, no documents, just shifting details. Still, it fit the mood. Communities watched as aggressive policing and a sensationalized music industry collided, fueling suspicion. Critics noted the lack of evidence, but for many, the absence of proof only deepened their doubts. Journalists and scholars have dissected these narratives for years. Webb's series drew both praise and fierce rebuttal, but the trust it eroded never fully returned. The legend of the secret meeting persists online, shaping how people interpret every new headline. In the neighborhoods where drill music later emerged, skepticism became a filter for every story about drugs, policing, and profit. In August 2017, a classified memo landed on the desks of federal agents across the country. The FBI had coined a new label, Black Identity Extremist, or BIE. The memo didn't name artists or activists, but its language was broad enough to cast a shadow over anyone using music or protest to speak out. Drill wasn't mentioned by name, but the timing was no accident. The years before had seen a surge in protest music, viral rap videos, and street movements from Ferguson to Chicago's South Side. Internal documents, uncovered through Freedom of Information Act requests, show federal agencies tracking not just protests, but the cultural events that followed. Rap shows, open mics, even memorials for victims of violence. Agents flagged lyrics and hashtags, cross-referenced social media posts, and cataloged the faces of anyone who drew a crowd. This wasn't just about keeping tabs on crime. The memos recommended monitoring music festivals and community gatherings as potential sources of unrest. They highlighted the way songs, videos, and online beefs could spark real-world action. In one excerpt, analysts warned that narrative-driven music had the power to mobilize disaffected youth. Another section outlined strategies for positive messaging campaigns, government code for shaping public perception through culture, not just law enforcement. By 2018, the term BIE had become a catch-all for everything from protest art to drill music, giving agencies a new tool to justify surveillance. Rap concerts in Chicago and New York saw increased undercover attendance. Social media teams built databases of artist handles, tracking who posted what and when. Some memos advised local police to liaise with event organizers and monitor for indicators of extremist rhetoric. Even as public outcry forced the FBI to retire the BIE label in 2019, the underlying practices continued. Law enforcement still scoured lyrics and live streams for intelligence, treating culture as both a threat and a source of evidence. The paper trail is clear. From COINTELPRO's analog files to today's digital watch lists, the system has never stopped watching. Drill's rise happened under this modern microscope. Every upload and every show shadowed by a network of analysts trained to see culture as a crime scene in waiting. Drill didn't just spread from block to block. It went global almost overnight, and the engine behind that explosion wasn't a record label or a radio station. It was the algorithm, YouTube's recommendation system, tuned to maximize watch time and clicks, started pushing drill videos to millions. The more shocking the content, the faster it traveled. Diss tracks, street beefs, and raw studio sessions racked up views in the tens of millions, often outpacing mainstream pop releases. Autoplay chains would feed viewers from one local feud to the next, turning neighborhood conflicts into worldwide entertainment. Inside YouTube, some employees noticed the pattern. As early as 2014, staff flagged drill uploads that linked directly to real-world violence, sometimes within hours of a new diss track dropping. But the internal debate always circled back to one thing: engagement. If a video kept people watching, it stayed in rotation. Safety teams raised concerns, but executives worried about accusations of censorship or bias. In practice, the priority was clear: keep viewers hooked, no matter the consequences. Record labels watched the numbers climb and adjusted their strategy. Controversy became a selling point. Artists who could generate headlines, whether for a viral lyric or a public feud, got fast-tracked for contracts. The same platforms that amplified drill also made it nearly impossible to separate performance from reality. Online beefs bled into the streets, and every new tragedy sent another wave of clicks back to the source. The result was a feedback loop. Violence and drama fed the algorithm fed the audience, and the audience fed the industry. What started as a local sound became a global spectacle, with tech platforms quietly shaping the story behind the scenes. Engagement was king, and in Drill's rise, the cost of that attention was measured in more than just views. Courtrooms across the United States have become battlegrounds over the meaning of rap lyrics. Since the 1980s, prosecutors have introduced verses and videos as evidence in nearly 700 criminal cases. The trend isn't limited to high-profile artists. Local rappers, teenagers, and even fans have found their words scrutinized by police and lawyers. In Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles, entire teams within law enforcement now monitor YouTube and Instagram, scraping posts for references to gangs, guns, or unsolved crimes. Specialized software, Geophedia, Media Sonar, Dataminar, lets officers flag drill lyrics and videos in real time, building digital files that can be used to bolster charges or justify surveillance. Prosecutors argue that lyrics are confessions, proof of intent, or even direct admissions of guilt. In the O Block RICO case, federal agents cited Instagram videos and unreleased tracks as evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy. In New Jersey, Vontae Skinner's notebook rhymes were read aloud to a jury as proof of his mindset, even though the lyrics weren't tied to any specific crime. On the other side, defense attorneys and civil rights advocates warn that this approach blurs the line between art and action. They argue that rap's violent language is often metaphor, not autobiography, and that treating it as literal evidence risks deepening racial bias and silencing free expression. Legal scholars point to the numbers. In most cases, the introduction of lyrics helps the prosecution, increasing the odds of conviction. Appellate courts have sometimes pushed back, overturning verdicts when judges admit lyrics with little connection to the alleged crime. But the practice continues. The debate isn't just about fairness in a single trial. It's about whether the criminal justice system sees black art as culture or as a confession waiting to be weaponized. As surveillance tactics evolve, so does the risk that every bar, every post, and every beat can be turned against the artist who created it. Spring 2014 in Chicago, a new track lands on YouTube. OTF Nunu's latest diss, sharp and direct, aimed at rivals by name. The comments section fills up in hours. Instagram posts fly back and forth, each one more pointed than the last. On Twitter, threats and taunts stack up in real time. For weeks, the beef lives online, each side dropping new verses, racking up views, and pushing the feud into public territory. Every upload gets shared, remixed, and dissected by fans and enemies alike. The numbers climb, tens of thousands of plays, hundreds of comments, a digital crowd egging on the drama. Late May, the tension is impossible to ignore. Nunu's lyrics don't just reference old grudges, they call out specific blocks, hint at real-world scores to settle. Rival crews answer with their own tracks, each one escalating the language and the stakes. The cycle is relentless. A new song drops, the streets talk, and the next day brings another response. It's not just music anymore. It's a running scoreboard, broadcast for anyone with a phone. May 31st, 2014. Nunu is sitting in an SUV outside a shopping center on 87th Street. Shots ring out. Surveillance cameras capture the chaos as the shooter flees. Within hours, news breaks. Another young rapper, dead. The speculation starts immediately. Media outlets point to the online feuds, the weeks of public provocation, the digital trail that led up to the shooting. On Instagram, tributes and taunts pour in from both sides. For fans and rivals, the boundary between the screen and the street has all but disappeared. The feedback loop is complete. What started as a war of words online ends with a body in a parking lot. And the cycle, driven by clicks and clout, is already looking for its next target. In 2013, Chicago closed 49 public schools, the largest single wave in U.S. history. This, combined with decades of job loss and redlining, set the stage for drill's rise. FBI documents confirm COINTELPRO targeted black music and movements from 1956 to 1971, and a 2017 FOIA memo shows that federal agencies still monitor cultural scenes. Yet, no declassified files directly link the CIA to drill music's creation. Instead, the facts reveal a pattern. Structural neglect created the environment, and modern surveillance watched as drill spread online. Over 700 U.S. court cases have used rap lyrics as evidence since the 1980s. What remains hidden are the full details of current monitoring and whether agencies played a more active role. Today, algorithms amplify drill's reach, while law enforcement tracks its artists. The story of drill is shaped by policy, technology, and history. Not a single secret plan, but a traceable legacy of power and oversight.